Happy Friday, boys and girls. Yesterday's video I had the day wrong. I apologize, but you will be listening to this video on Friday. And this is Mrs. Schlins, and we are about to start chapter 4 of As the Red Fern Grows, written by Wilson Rawls. And before we get started, I left you on the last reading of chapter 3 with some questions. And I asked you, why do you think Grandpa wrote a letter and mailed it to the kennel outfit instead of calling on the telephone? And I also asked, wouldn't using a telephone or a phone instead of writing a letter be faster? Well, I want you to look at this 1930s phone right here, and this is a phone that typically you find in a house if you have a landline in your house. Many people do not these days, they only have cell phones. But listen to this. Imagine yourself living back in the 1920s or 30s. Telephones were wired into businesses and homes. This was not common when the novel took place back in the late 1920s or 1930s. So Billy did not probably have a telephone in his home, or the businesses didn't. So Miss Schlins will make an inference here that there was a big possibility that the grandfather's store did not have a telephone located inside, and also the kennel outfit may not have had a telephone. It wasn't until the middle of the 1950s when phones became popular in homes and businesses in the United States. Okay, it's now time for us to talk about vocabulary words. We have quite a few in this chapter, and I have pictures to go along with them. Our first word is half a dozen, and this is a noun, and it is a set or group of 6. Now, when your mama or your grandmama or your daddy or granddaddy goes to the grocery store, normally they may buy a pack or a dozen eggs. Well, as you see here, we only have 6, and that's half of a dozen. And a dozen refers to a group of 12 items, and half of 12 is 6. Eggs and packs of soda like Sprite and Coke, and when your daddy gets your mama roses on Valentine's Day, these are items that are sold in half dozen, which are 6, and a dozen quantities, which is 12. You will hear the term half a dozen early in chapter 4. Your next word is depot, and that is a noun. And a depot is also known as a train depot or a train station. And trains would stop at the depot and load or unload cargo, which could be food or it could be clothing for stores to sell. It could be a number of different items. And passengers, people who were traveling on the train, would get on and off. In almost every town that had a railroad running through it had a depot. So I wanted to show you a few of our local depots, and this depot is in Milan, Georgia. That's a picture from 1986. And this is the depot in McRae. It's located behind Chasmar, and it's not really usable by trains now. And this is the depot in Helena, and this depot has been turned into a museum about Telfair County. I just wanted to show you what a depot looks like. This is where the trains used to stop and let people off and put cargo on or take cargo off. Our next word is smokehouse. And this is what they typically look like. And a smokehouse is a building where meat or fish is cured with smoke. Back in the day, they didn't have refrigerators. And whenever you went hunting or fishing, or you may have slaughtered a pig or a cow, you couldn't put your meat in the refrigerator or in a freezer to keep safe for you to eat. So they would smoke the meat. to cure it, to keep it safe for you to eat. And then the finished product might be stored in the building sometime for a year or more, and many times the meat was also heavily salted to keep it fresh. Now you see they have meats hanging from the ceiling, and the reason for this was so rats and other animals crawling across the floor couldn't reach up and get to the meat. So again, smokehouses were used to keep meat and fish from spoiling before refrigerators and freezers were invented and used in homes. Our next word is bore, and it is a verb, but it's not like, oh, Miss Lynn's, you are so boring. That's not what this word means, and I hope I'm not being boring. But the word bore that's going to be used in chapter 4 today means to make one's way through. So in chapter 4, Billy is going to bore his way, find his way, make his way through the woods. Your next word is rifle, and it is a noun, and this is not the rifle that you may think of. It has nothing to do with a firearm or a gun. It has to do with streams and rivers and creeks. And this type of rifles are the shallower sections of a stream. When you're wanting to cross a stream or a creek or a river, you look for areas with fast current where the rocks break the water surface so you can tiptoe or wade over to the other side. Your next word is spell. Again, this is not the kind of spell like you spell a word or you have a spelling test. This spell is a noun, and it is a period of time when you would just sit down and rest. And my grandfather used to say, come on in and sit a spell. And that means he wanted us to come on in and sit down and us have just a good talk. So a spell in chapter 4 is a period of time when you would sit and rest. The next word, the word is pang, and it is a noun, and it's a sudden, sharp pain. Pang and pain sound kind of alike, really alike, and they are synonyms, but in the story they're going to use pang. And if you look, this young man is having a pang in his head. And you know what? When little babies get hungry and they feel pangs of hunger, what do? They make this face right here and they cry. Our next word is provisions, and it is a noun, and it's plural. And it is a supply of food and other things that are needed. And the provisions that are discussed in chapter 4 that are listed are what Billy needs to survive. So we got some beans here that you can cook. Got some cornbread here you can eat. Here is some sardines in a can, and the matches could be used to cook the beans and warm up the sardines. So those are provisions, things you need to survive. Went, and it is a verb. And look at this face right here. Think about what might be happening to her. Think about what happens when you're about to get hit with the ball and dodgeball. Do you make this face? Do you wince? She could also be getting a shot. Or she could also be told, oh, you're about to have to take some yucky medicine, and she's making that face. So wince is to give a slight involuntary grimace, which is kind of like an afraid face, a scaredy face, or a shrinking movement of the body out of or in anticipation of pain or distress. And in the story, the past tense of this verb will be used. You will hear the narrator say winced. Your next word is gawk, and it is a verb, and it is to stare openly and stupidly. You're staring and you don't care if the person knows that you're staring at them and looking them up and down, and you're probably making a face like this lady right here. And when you gawk at someone, it is very rude and it could hurt their feelings. And in chapter 4, the past tense of this verb again will be used, and you will hear the word gawked. Our next word is arithmetic, and it is a noun, and it is another word or a synonym for the words of mathematics or math. And my grandfather, he never said, "How are you doing in math?" He says, "How's the arithmetic going for you?" So he was referring to math when he was talking about arithmetic. And we have some important points of interest in chapter 4 that I'm going to go over quickly. And you're going to hear about a flour sack. Flour did not come in paper sacks like your mama or grandmother buys it today. It was a white cotton bag used for carrying flour. And the material of the bag was lighter and softer than burlap. And people did not throw the flour sacks away because they were still useful. So every kitchen probably had a few empty flour sacks in their cabinet. Now, I found at my grandmother's house after she died, she had made dresses for my mama and my aunt out of flour sacks. And a gunny sack is a burlap bag used for carrying produce such as potatoes, apples, or coffee. And the material is very rough and scratchy. So my grandmother wouldn't have made my mama and my aunt gunny sack dresses, but my grandmother had these on hand in her cabinet, like your mama or your grandmother probably keeps the plastic sacks from Harvey's or from Walmart. They use these gunny sacks to carry things around as well. All right. I want you to listen carefully in chapter 4 as the narrator discusses where he was only able to get a haircut. And then I want you to hear or listen to the phrase, "as the crow flies." And this is an expression that explains that it is shorter to travel in a straight line than on roads with twists and turns and curves and maybe going up mountains and going over hills. As the crow flies means a straight line from one place to another. And then corn tassel hair describes that Billy's hair is not freshly combed. In fact, it is a mess, and it looks like the top of a corn cob that has not had its shucks removed. You're going to hear that in the story. So I'm about ready to read chapter 4. And remember again, after chapter 4, you will have a test over chapters 1 through 4. So listen carefully as I read in the next video. I'll see y'all in just a second.